your man, Louie Tee. Welcome to the 2019 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series where your man Louie Tee aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2019 NFL Draft using our baseball grading scale. Single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the Draft Wrap-Up Series as we cannot tell how these players are going to pan out. And I don't want to discount any of these young men before they get their chance in the National Football League. And so we'll get a score for each and every single player selected in said team's draft. We'll apply bonuses when necessary, get an aggregate score, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right, you, the viewer, are in total control as this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos stating two things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. Some examples would be Lions next, Detroit next, Detroit Lions next, Det next. You get where I'm going with this. As a matter of fact, the next team up in the series is none other than the Detroit Lions. And this is a team here in Detroit that they're so frustrating. They really are, because on one hand, you look at Matthew Stafford and you say, is this guy ever going to win anything meaningful? Can they get out of their own way? It just seems like they're one of those teams that's caught in mediocrity. They're always right around that 7 to 9 window in terms of wins. They're anywhere from 6-10 to 9-7, and on a good year they'll get to 10-6. On a great year they're 11-5, but that's usually still not good enough to win the division, and so they're getting in as a wild card. And then generally they don't get out of wild card weekend when they do make it to the postseason, and so it's just frustrating for the Detroit Lions because they're kind of caught in this rut, and it's generally 7-9, 8-8, 9-7. Like I said, there aren't many years where they go the 6-10 route. If they have some injuries and guys aren't healthy and the ball doesn't bounce their way, then they could be 6-10. But for the most part, with Stafford at quarterback, they're going to win some games. He's going to throw for a ton of yards, and they're going to be 7-9, 8-8, 9-7. But can they be better than that? And I just don't know the direction of this team sometimes. Like last year, they just seemed lost last year. And I wasn't a fan, and I talked to a bunch of Lions fans that thought they needed to move on from Jim Caldwell. I didn't think that was the right move. I wasn't a fan of that. But again, I'm not a Lions fan, so I can't tell them what they should feel. And I'm not going through the everyday minutia of following the Lions. So they were closer to that situation, and more Lions fans said it was time for him to go than he needed to stay. So I had to take their word for it. But you bring in Matt Patricia, and I'm just telling you, he didn't seem like a good fit last year. And again, I'm not one to jump on coaches right away because, again, the norm isn't Sean McVay and what we saw in Chicago with Matt Nagy and what we saw in Buffalo year one with Sean McDermott. That's not the norm. The norm is what we saw in Detroit with Matt Patricia, the first-year head coach, kind of struggling to find his footing. And, every now and again you see flashes in that first year. That Sunday night game versus the Patriots, that was a doozy. I mean, you get that every now and again, but it's usually a struggle. It's a transition. Everyone's learning. There were reports of him not showing up to his own meetings on time. And we don't know what's true, what's not true. I'm not here to get into all that. I just know this. I still don't feel good about the Lions right now. I just don't. And I don't really necessarily feel great about their roster either. Now, that being said, I do feel good about Matthew Stafford. So with Stafford, you have a shot and a chance. And I think if you're able to put enough talent around him, and if this defense can catch lightning in a bottle, which I don't necessarily believe in their defense either, then maybe you got something in Detroit. I don't know. I feel like they're the Miami Dolphins of the NFC, where except they actually have a quarterback and the Dolphins don't. But I feel like they're one of those meddling teams, 6-10, 7-9, 8-8. Every year you can count on it. They're going to be right there. They're not going to be bad enough to be 4-12 or 5-11, but they're going to be just bad enough to be 7-9, 8-8, and not get a great draft pick. And that's generally how I feel about the Lions every year. They're going to be selecting somewhere from 11, generally most seasons. They're going to be selecting anywhere from 11 to 17 in the draft. This year, they were 8th. So it was a rough year. And like I said, first year head coach, you expect some growing pains, and that's what they got. But I'm ready for Bob Quinn and company to turn this thing around. And maybe this is the draft that it helps them do that. And maybe some of the pieces that they acquired in the offseason and free agency, like a Justin Coleman at the cornerback position, can help them start to turn things around. Obviously, Trey Flowers was the big get in the offseason. So maybe you start to put some of these pieces together. Danny Amendola is another guy that you brought in at the receiver position. Maybe some of these veterans help some of these young guys. And you bring in some of these players in the draft, and all of a sudden you hit and strike lightning in the bottle, and maybe this is a year the Lions start to turn things around. We'll see. I'm not confident about that, but nonetheless, let's take a look at the 2019 NFL Draft of the Detroit Lions, and we start in the first round, 8th overall selection. Tight end out of Iowa, T.J. Hawkinson. Super intelligent T.J. Hawkinson is the pick to get this Lions draft underway. He's a tight end. Do 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 do. Tight end. Tight end. Y'all don't even know what I'm talking about right now. So let me just jump right into it. I'm not going to break down TJ Hawkinson, as I've already done that in the Draft Prospects 101 series. So if you're looking for a thorough breakdown of TJ Hawkinson with film and what he brings to the table, check out the 2019 NFL Draft Prospects 101 series on the Louie Tee Network in the playlist section. Okay, so this guy is a stud. He was the best tight end in this draft, the most complete tight end by far and away, the most complete tight end in this draft, which is what made him so appealing and attracting as a top 10 pick in this draft. He's not the athlete that his counterpart at Iowa was in Noah Fant, but he is a good enough athlete to make things happen in the pass game. I think he's still got some growing to do as a pass catcher and a route runner more specifically. But if you're talking about all-around tight end, can block at the point of attack, can be moved around, but can do so many different things, you're talking about TJ Hawkinson. And so it's a phenomenal pick. Let's take tight end off the board, as I thought that was one of the biggest needs. As a matter of fact, the biggest need for the Lions. And while we're talking about needs and we're on that subject matter, let me go through the needs that I deem to be the biggest needs in order for the Detroit Lions heading into the draft. Tight end, obviously, the biggest need. Now, you got Jesse James in free agency, and you could look at him as a guy that could have potentially started for you. And if you did nothing at tight end, let's say that Hawkinson came off the board, or you got to pick a deal you couldn't refuse in the first round to move back, and you didn't get a tight end, and then you didn't bother drafting one in this entire draft. Michael Roberts and Jesse James, I think you would have been fine with that. And you brought in another tight end to compete, and you might have been fine at the tight end position if you didn't get a tight end. But I feel like if you're looking to take that next step offensively with some of the guys you have at receiver and the running backs, the next step to take would be to tie it all in together with a tight end that can block and do everything, and that's what TJ Hawkinson brings to the table. So you got that out of the way. Wide receiver, I just didn't think there was enough at the receiver position. If you're telling me that all you really have is Marvin Jones Jr. and what's his name? And I really like this guy. And he had a breakout year last year, over 1,000 yards receiving. And I'm gonna be the first to admit I didn't think he was gonna be as good as he was, especially not this fast. His name will come to me, but he was a big play threat for you last year at the receiver position. But if you're telling me those are your two receivers, then that's just not enough. Now, you got Danny Amendola, but Amendola wasn't great in Miami last year, and so you got to think that he's on his last legs. You needed more help at receiver, and you got that in this draft. So that's a big need for me. Edge rusher, obviously Trey Flowers. Romeo Okwara was your best edge rusher last year, but that's just not enough. So you needed depth, if nothing else, at that position, and you got that in this draft. So that was another need that I thought you were able to knock down. Cornerback, Darius Slay, big play Slay, out holding out currently for a new deal. We'll see if he gets what he's looking for and what he's after. But you got him. You went out and got Justin Coleman. Honestly, after those two, I really don't know what you have at the cornerback position. I mean, you just got a bunch of stuff, and I don't really know if any of that stuff excites you or not at the cornerback position. So I'm looking for an upgrade there. I think you may have found an upgrade here in the draft. So we'll talk about that when we get there. Safety, obviously, you've done some things over the years at the safety position. Don't really know if you are satisfied with what you have at the safety position. You drafted a kid last year Tracy Walker out of Louisiana Lafayette that has some talent, and I think at the end of the year he started to come on a little bit. So that may be a guy that you're looking to take the place of Grover Quinn at the safety position. But when you look at the safety position, I just think you need more depth. I just feel like you just need more stuff at the safety. Just throw some more darts at the safety position, see if it sticks. You did that in this draft, so thought safety was something you needed to address, and you did. And then offensive line, really, to me, offensive line isn't as bad. That's why it's at the back end of this needs list going into the draft. To be honest with you, I think you just got one position that you should be looking to upgrade. And it's not necessarily destitute at right guard, but I'm not really cool with Kenny Wiggins as a starter. Joe Dahl, I think he's more depth. Those are your guys that are battling for that position. I'm not really comfortable with Kenny Wiggins starting at guard, but if you are, I'm cool if you cool. I just thought that an upgrade was in order along the offensive line, specifically at right guard. But, I mean, if you're cool, I'm cool. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on because there's some guys that could potentially get an opportunity to not only make this roster, but potentially see some time at guard later on down the line. We'll talk about that. But let's jump into this draft, as I mentioned. And TJ Hawkinson is your first pick. And like I said, I'm not going to break him down. Outstanding pick for the Lions in the top 10 at 8 overall. This guy's going to jump in, and you're going to get immediate production from him as a blocker and a guy that can catch the football. Matthew Stafford hasn't been one to force feed tight ends over his career, although earlier in his career, Brandon Pettigrew was a guy that would catch 70 balls. I think he did that a couple of times in his career. That being said, Stafford hasn't had a lot of production out of the tight end position. That may change with TJ Hawkinson. We'll see. But if nothing else, you're getting a guy that's going to help the run game immensely. And if the run game gets better, it's going to take some of the pressure off of Matthew Stafford. And that also is going to open up some avenues for you to... Kenny Golladay is his goddamn name. I knew that shit would come to me. Kenny Golladay is a guy that I was wrong about. I didn't think he would be this good, this fast. He's a true, legit number one in this league. And if you look at Marvin Jones Jr., I think that's a solid number 2, but you're not guaranteed to have him under contract after this upcoming season. So I just thought you needed to add more stuff at the receiver position, and that you did in this draft. So with that being said, first round, 8th overall selection, TJ Hawkinson for me to get this draft underway is...
Hits one high! Hits it deep! It is out of here!
So, for those of you who haven't watched the video on TJ Hawkinson already, to me, my comp for him is Chris Cooley, the ex-Washington Redskin tight end who was fantastic for the Redskins for many years, was a Pro Bowler in this league. And so Chris Cooley could block, Chris Cooley could catch. And I think a lot of those same traits are here with TJ Hawkinson. And I think this guy comes in ready to get it done immediately to upgrade what was a very average at best position for the Lions. I think has been upgraded tremendously with the addition of TJ Hawkinson. As we go to your second round, and this is where this is why I think the Lions are an average football team, because of selections like this. I could be proven wrong here. I was wrong about Kenny Golladay a couple of years ago. And I didn't say Kenny Golladay was going to be trash. I just didn't think he was worthy of the selection that you made. I thought it was a little high for him. Just like I think this is a little high for this pick here in the second round, 43rd overall linebacker out of Hawaii. Jahlani Tavai is the pick. So we're in the second round, and this is a draft that was very, very low on the linebackers. If you didn't get one of the Devons in the first round, then you pretty much could wait to get a linebacker third, fourth round or later. I thought that's the kind of draft that it was at the linebacker position. You just weren't going to get the kind of value you were seeking at the linebacker position. If you didn't get one of the Devons in the first round, you probably weren't going to get the kind of value you were looking for until fourth round or later. If you wanted to get somebody in the third round and you felt like they fit your scheme to a T, then you could get away with a third round linebacker, but nothing before then, not after the two Devons. And I thought you violated here, to be honest with you, with a guy that was rising up the draft board, but not to this extent where he needed to be selected in the second round. I honestly don't know what the hell was the thought process here, but you made the selection. I don't love it, as you can tell, but 6'2", 250, which is a big linebacker in today's NFL. and he's got 32-inch arms. He can move a little bit. So from that standpoint, you like the size and the athleticism that comes in that frame. But again, I didn't see that kind of play on tape that would warrant a second-round selection. A big, long, active linebacker with some run and chase ability, along with some pass rush ability. Not great at either, and despite his 250-pound frame, not as physical as one would like him to be. But he plays hard and usually does get to the ball carrier and get him down when in position. His size, his motor, and tackling ability will entice a team in a very weak linebacker draft class. All right, and obviously I thought it would entice a team to maybe select him in the 3rd or 4th, preferably the 4th round, not the 2nd round. So I thought this was an extreme reach. Let's take an opportunity to acknowledge that. This is a reach here in the 2nd round. I do not love this selection. I do not love this player at this selection. I don't have a problem with the player himself, but you know what this reminds me of, and I think this is going to end up in the same way for you. Remember when you selected Cal Van Noy in the 2nd round out of BYU and didn't know what the hell to do with him, and ultimately he didn't play good football for you, didn't start playing good football until he got to New England? That's what's going to happen here. You just wasted a 2nd-round pick. That's how you stay mediocre in this league. You can't afford to waste 2nd-round picks. Now, again, I could be wrong. And maybe Matt Patricia knows exactly what he's looking for. And maybe this is exactly what he needs. A big, physical linebacker who I don't think is as physical as his 250-pound frame is supposed to indicate. But nonetheless, 250 is 250. There's no other way to say that. That's in today's NFL, where most linebackers coming into the league at 230, 235, at best 240. This guy's 250, so he's big. All right, he's got some weight on him, but I don't love this selection. To me, the comp for him is Reggie Ragland, a guy that, to me, doesn't move the needle at all and has been an underachiever since getting in the league. He was drafted by Buffalo and has since been traded to Kansas City, where I think he's playing solid football for them, but he's not lighting the world on fire in Kansas City. I don't think Jahlani Tavai is going to light the world on fire for you in Detroit. But again, and really, I looked at the linebacker position for the Lions, and I thought to myself, it's not that bad. You know, I thought there was other talent that was on the board available for you to select here in the 2nd round that would have made your defense exponentially better. And even if you needed a linebacker, I thought you could have gotten one later in the draft. So I don't love this pick on a number of different levels, but nonetheless, in the 2nd round, 43rd pick overall, linebacker out of Hawaii, Jahlani Tavai for me is So we move on to the 3rd round now. 81st pick overall, defensive back out of Boston College, Will Harris is the pick. So you look at Will Harris. This is a guy that has that same kind of look of today's NFL safety. Looks like a corner, plays the safety position, can drop over the slot, give you some coverage there. Can do a little bit of both. And that's the goal in today's NFL, is to get you a guy that can do both. A guy that can rock and roll at the safety position. Play a little free, play a little strong, give you a little bit of everything. And that's what you're getting here in Will Harris. So I talked about needing depth at the safety position. As a matter of fact, that's one of the needs. Let's go ahead and take that off the board. I told you I felt like you needed a little bit more depth at the safety position. Again, Tracy Walker giving you a little something there last year, and I think that's a guy that you really like. But I still think you need more depth at the safety position, and that's what a guy like Will Harris is going to bring to the table. Rangy safety who isn't opposed to contact and does a good job of taking solid angles and getting ball carriers on the ground. Best attribute is his ability to drop over the slot and run with tight ends with his size and athleticism, which gives him a chance to flourish in that capacity. You're talking about a guy that's 6'1", 200 and almost 10 pounds. So he's not a guy that's going to get big bodied by the tight ends in this league. At 6'1" with some length and a little bit of size, he's a guy that will be right there in the picture, has the athleticism. This is a 4'4" guy in terms of 40 with a 36.5-inch vert. So you're talking about one of those elite athletes at the safety position. So there's a lot of things. Now, he doesn't always play with the instincts that you're looking for at the safety position to maximize that 4'4" speed. But He's a guy that definitely has some athleticism and can drop over the slot and run with these tight ends in this league. While he isn't the playmaker that in that regard, okay, with that speed, in that size, you would like him to be a little bit more of a playmaker, but he's not that guy. Like I said, he lacks the ability to see things before they happen. He's more of a reactionary safety than a proaction type of safety and a proactive safety where he has those instincts and makes plays. He's not jumping routes. He's more of, hey, I need to see it, then I react to it. But in any event, he will be a solid rock and roll safety option potentially at the NFL level, which is what I mentioned. I think he can come down in the box as an eighth defender and not be out of place. You know, he can get to the football, does like I said, does a phenomenal job of taking good angles to the rock and getting to guys. He does a good job of getting guys on the ground as well and not afraid of contact. He's physical. Even though he has that cornerback type look to him, he's not afraid to throw his body around. So I look at him as a guy that can do some things. I don't think he has the instincts of the guy that I'm comparing him to, but I think he has the potential to make some plays like the guy I'm comparing him to. My comp for him is a safety that I really like in Miami in Rashad Jones, a guy that has made plenty of plays in this league for the Miami Dolphins and can drop over the slot, probably does his best work in the box, but not afraid to make plays on the football. I think Will Harris is a guy that you feel more comfortable dropping over the slot and running with some of these tight ends and making plays in that regard. But again, he may be able to grow into a guy that can make plays, pick passes off. But right now, I don't think that's where he is in his development. But the athleticism, the length, the size, it's all there. And like I said, he's not afraid to tackle, so you get some added benefit there as a guy that can drop down in the box as an eighth defender if need be. So I like a lot of what he brings to the table, and so you get yourself a quality football player here in the third round in safety. Will Harris, 81st pick overall out of Boston College. Will Harris, for me, is so this is where the draft of the Detroit Lions starts to get a little juicy for me. This is when I thought they started to make some really good selections. Guys that I think immediately come in and boost this roster and potentially could pay off some dividends in their rookie campaigns. We start with the first of two guys that I really like in this draft. Fourth round, 117th overall selection, edge rusher out of Clemson. Austin Bryant is the selection. So Austin Bryant is the forgotten man on that talented, uber talented Clemson defensive line. You start reeling off the names on that line. All four of them got drafted, similar to the NC State defensive line a few years ago with Chubb and all of those guys, Justin Jones and B.J. Hill and all of those talented guys on that line. All four of them got drafted. Same thing here with this talented Clemson defensive line. All four of these guys got drafted, but when you start reeling off the names, you don't talk about Austin Bryant. You know, you talk about the two guys inside and Dexter Lawrence and the other defensive tackle that went to the Dolphins, his name Christian Wilkins, and then you talk about Cleveland Farrell, but rarely does anyone rattle off the name Austin Bryant, and I think that's a mistake. You know, sometimes like at Alabama, when you see that talented front seven and you're like, man, how good is this guy actually? Is it just because of the talent around him, or is he actually really good? You could argue that case for Austin Bryant, but I'm here to tell you he's actually good. He's not a guy that, yes, he benefited from having talented football players around, but they benefited by him being on that defensive line as well. It was the mutual benefit to all parties involved. It was just talent all around, and he was a guy that added to it at 6'4", 270. And you look at his frame at 6'4", 271, I think it's a frame that actually could stand to gain 10 pounds or so. Like, he can actually get bigger, stouter at the point of attack, and I don't think he'll lose any of his athleticism. And if that's the case with his length, he's got an extreme length, there's something here to Austin Bryant. Let's talk about him quickly. One of the unsung members of an uber-talented Clemson defensive front, Austin Bryant didn't just take advantage of the talent around him, he added to it, bagging the quarterback 16 and a half times over the last two seasons. With above average quickness and ridiculous length for the position with 35-inch arms. Yes, this man has ridiculous length. Bryant's size and competitiveness makes him the perfect base end. If he can just get a tad bit stronger at the point of attack, this guy has the goods to become a very productive NFL defensive end. And I think he's going to do that. I think he's going to put on some weight. I think he's going to get to 275, 277, 280 potentially, and really get stouter at the point of attack, which is the one thing you could question him right now. Is even at 270, you felt like he was a little, I don't want to call him soft. Soft is not the right word. I thought he just wasn't as stout as you would think a 270-pounder would be in the run game. I think you add on a little bit muscle, a little bit more bulk, and you get a little bit stronger and get that core stronger. I think this is a guy that can not only stand up to the run game, but also get to the quarterback. He's got some talent there, and he's able to get to the quarterback. As I said, 16 and a half sacks, no fluke there. And yes, he was on the talented line, but he was talented himself. He's a guy that can win with that length, and I hope he gets some great coaching to really use that length to his advantage. When you got 35-inch arms, that's a big-time weapon at the NFL level. You should beat tackles off the strength of your length. With that kind of reach, there's a distinct advantage that you have against the guy in front of you. So hopefully he learns how to utilize that and becomes that much better of a rusher because of the length that he has, not to mention some really good get off and quickness off the snap as well. So this is a guy that brings a lot to the table. As you can see, edge rusher now taken off the board for the Detroit Lions. This is a big get for them, and I think this is a guy that is going to come in and he's going to get snaps. You've got two guys that you like already, as I mentioned at the top of the show, and Romeo Okwara, who got you 7.5 sacks last year and led the team in sacks. You're going to add Trey Flowers to the mix, who has never been a real sack guy throughout his career, but is a guy that does get pressure on the quarterback. I think Austin Bryant is a guy that you're going to find snaps for, even if it's in a base package on third downs alone. He's going to find the field, and it won't be too long before he's getting starters reps. I really believe that in Detroit. Here in the fourth round, 117th overall selection, edge rusher out of Clemson, Austin Bryant for me is So if you're looking for a comp for Austin Bryant, my comp is the ex-Georgia Tech product that was selected by the Cincinnati Bengals in the draft in Michael Johnson. Tall, long defender that has some ability to get to the quarterback. Got a big deal in Tampa, didn't work there, came back to the Cincinnati Bengals. This guy has a lot of what Michael Johnson has. That length can't be taught. Some quickness off the edge. I think this guy has a chance to really enhance the pass rush of the Lions that really struggled last year. You don't have the kind of pass rush that you're looking. That's why you added Trey Flowers. That's why you add a guy like Austin Bryant, because you needed help along the edges getting to the quarterback, and I think you've done that this offseason and with a guy like Austin Bryant. You go to the next pick, 5th round, 146th overall, defensive back out of Penn State. Amani Oruwariye is the pick. So Amani Oruwariye is a guy that I really, really like. And he has some things you just simply can't teach. And in today's NFL, where the receivers seem to be getting bigger and bigger, faster and stronger, you need guys like Amani Oruwariye to run with these guys, to lay hands on these guys, to be physical with them, and to be able to jump and make plays at the apex and go up and swat balls away. And so I think this is a guy that can do that at 6'2", 205. A height, weight, speed specimen at the cornerback position with intriguing ball skills and production. Over the last 2 seasons, Oruwariye has 20 pass breakups to go along with 7 INTs. In only 13 starts, he was only a starter in 2018. He did not start in 2017. Still had 4 picks in 2017, despite only having, but not starting the entire year. He's willing to tackle, makes plays on the ball, and has the type of length to bother receivers at the line of scrimmage. However, he lacks elite closing speed and doesn't possess the makeup speed or burst to get back into plays once he's beaten, which means he'll have to do his work early to be effective or play in a zone-based scheme to tap into his true potential. So there are some things with Oruwariye that you have to keep in mind. He's long, he's active as a corner, can go up and get the football, does a great job when he jams at the line of scrimmage. But if he misses and a guy gets on top of him that has true deep threat speed, he can get beat. He's a guy that likes to keep everything in front of him, so he will give up some underneath completions. He's a guy that doesn't have the click and close ability, so he's not driving on passes and breaking them up the way you would like him to sometimes. But again, he's a guy that if you make a mistake in his vicinity, you will pay for a mistake. There was a pick late in the ball game, first game of the season in 2018 versus App State at home in a game that Penn State was on the ropes, easily could have lost that football game, probably should have lost that game. Goes to overtime. Penn State strikes first blood in overtime. App State's looking to tie it up with a touchdown, and Oruwariye climbs the ladder and picks off the pass to end the game and win it and seal it for Penn State. And he's got that ability. Climbed the ladder, took the football away from the wideout on that play. That's what he can do with that 6'2 frame, some length, and the ability to go up and get footballs and contest them in some tough situations. So really like what he brings to the table. Not afraid to tackle out on the edge either. So he's not one of these corners with size but afraid to use it in the run game. He'll come up and support there as well. So the only knock I have on him is that he doesn't have that click and close ability on underneath routes. So that comeback that he's off playing cover 3 and a guy runs a comeback or a guy runs a slant, he's not going to drive on that necessarily and make the play as you would like him to. And if he comes up and is aggressive in bump and run and a guy's able to beat him initially off the snap with a good release and go vertical on him, he may not be able to get back into the hip pocket and get in phase to make a play on that football depending on the speed of that receiver. Despite him having 4.47 speed, he can run it, and he has a 36.5-inch vert to go with that size. So it's not like he's a slouch. It's just that acceleration isn't tremendous. He's a build-up speed guy. And so if someone with some acceleration that can run gets on top of him, it may be tough for him to get back into the play. But he's got the kind of length and the kind of ball skills and everything you're looking for in a long, lengthy corner. My comp for him is Dick Sherman. Yes, Richard Sherman is what I see. And remember, Dick Sherman was a 5th-round pick out of Stanford. So let's not act like Dick Sherman came into the league as Dick Sherman. He had to work to get to that status. I see a guy like Amani Oruwariye working towards being a premier corner in this league. And across from Darius Slay, he's going to get plenty of work. It's only a matter of time before this guy cracks the starting lineup. He may not initially, but he will get some reps. And I think eventually, sooner rather than later, he's going to be a starter for you, and he's going to play some damn good football. Here in the 5th round, 146th overall selection, defensive back out of Penn State, Amani Oruwariye. For me, let's take cornerback off the board, is so the Lions are knocking down needs left and right. They get rid of another one here in the 6th round, 184th overall pick. Wide receiver out of my alma mater, Old Dominion University. Travis Fulgham is the pick. Monarchs, stand up. We in the building. Travis Fulgham, 6th round selection out of Old Dominion University. Stand up. We in the building. And this is a guy that very talented. As a matter of fact, they had another receiver that I thought was going to get drafted named Jonathan Duhart, and he didn't get drafted. Guess where he ended up? You guessed it, in Detroit. You got yourself a twofer, a two-piece combination at the receiver position. It wouldn't shock me if both of these dudes made your roster because Jonathan Duhart is talented as well, and they put up a nasty 1-2 tandem at ODU, making corners pay in Conference USA all day in 2018. And so you got a guy in Travis Fulgham that is really talented, does a lot of the dirty work, will block, has some good size to him at 6'2", 215. Looks the part of an NFL number 2 target. And like I said, we don't know how much longer you're going to have Marvin Jones Jr. on your roster. This could be it for him. 2019 could be his last season in Detroit. And if it is, you need to have reinforcements ready to step in and contribute. Because like I said, you've got some stuff at receiver, just not enough of it. And I think this is a guy that could be the perfect complement to your number 1 wideout. And this guy has the size. Your number 1 wideout has some size and some speed. This guy has some size, not necessarily the speed and that's why he's not a number 1. Or else we would be talking about this guy as a potential number 1 option down the road. He's a number 2, and I think he's going to be a damn good second option in this league. Let's take wide receiver off the board. To me, that was a huge need for this Lions football team. And so you see the Lions knocking down some of their biggest needs in this draft, and they're doing it again here with Travis Fulgham. 6'2", 215, 34-inch arms. So that tells you that you're getting a guy with size, length, and some ability. And he got 36.5-inch vert so he can jump. And when you watch him on tape, he's a guy that goes up and gets the football at its highest point, at the apex, making plays on those 50-50 balls, on back shoulder fades, on just jump ball fades in the end zone. He's going up and he's making plays on the ball. And Matthew Stafford has never been one to shy away from giving his receivers opportunities to make plays on the football. This is a guy that you want to do that with because he will make you right as a quarterback. An all-around solid wide receiver prospect at 6'2", 215 with 34-inch arms and the innate ability to high point the football. Travis Fulgham looks the part of a legit number 2 wide receiver in the NFL. Lacking the elite top end speed to be a number 1 threat, Fulgham provides blocking, strong hands, catching traffic ability, and a dog mentality when the ball is in the air. While separation isn't his strong suit, his size and ability to catch the rock in traffic will prove to be his separator at the next level. I talked about this, and a wise man once told me that there is a new way to separate in the NFL. It used to be 2 ways. You either had to be quick and an extremely gifted route runner, or you had to be fast. Those were the 2 ways to separate. All right, now there's a new way to separate, and it's called size. And guys are just using their body and their frame to box guys out, and you run back shoulder fades and win that way. He's a guy that's going to be able to use his frame to box guys out, to go up and get the football, to be a basketball player at times of sorts because of his ability to go up and get the football. This guy has the ability to be a big-time player in this league, and I love this selection. I think this is good value. I thought he was more of a 5th rounder. You get him here in the 6th round, so I think this is a really good pick. And I think you got a 2-for-1 special. You get him and you get Jonathan Duhart as well as an undrafted guy. Maybe Duhart does or doesn't make your roster, but I think he's a guy you develop if he doesn't make your roster. I think Jonathan Duhart, when looking at the Lions' situation at wide receiver, I don't see any reason why both ODU wide receivers can't make your football team. I'm not saying. I'm just saying. I really feel like there's a legitimate opportunity for not just one, but both of those guys. What's better than 1? 2. All right. I think both of these guys can make your football team. But here in the 6th round, 184th pick overall, wide receiver out of Old Dominion University, Travis Fulgham for me is my comp for Travis Fulgham is Terrence Williams, the ex-Dallas Cowboy product by way of Baylor. That was a big guy, long strides, could catch the football and get yards after the catch because of his frame. I see a lot of what I saw in Terrence Williams in Travis Fulgham, a guy that can go up and get the football and make some plays in traffic. And so I look forward to seeing Travis Fulgham do some really good things at the next level for the Detroit Lions. As we move on to your next 6th round selection, 186th pick overall, running back out of Maryland, Ty Johnson is the pick. So Ty Johnson is a guy that comes in and gives you some depth at running back. I don't really know what this means. I don't know if you feel like this is a replacement for a Theo Riddick down the road, or I don't know how you view him. you went out and got C.J. Anderson in the offseason at the running back position to go along with the guy that I loved in the draft last year in the running back out of Auburn, who was really good for you when healthy. That's always been his bugaboo, is health. But when he's healthy, he's a guy that can do some special things. And we saw glimpses and flashes of that last season. So you got a nice little 1-2 combination there with those two backs. Obviously, Theo Riddick is the ultimate third down back in this league. He catches it like nobody's business. And so I love what Theo Riddick brings to the table. And we're going to see if Ty Johnson can add himself to the list of backs. You still have the Z-Man, Zach Zenner, at the running back position as well to go along with Kerryon Johnson. And as I mentioned, C.J. Anderson. So there's a healthy mix of guys in the backfield. And we're going to see if Ty Johnson can crack that group or not. I honestly don't think he's going to make your football team, but if you love what he brings to the table and you think that he fills a role for you that a guy like Zach Zenner does not, then maybe there is a roster spot for Ty Johnson with his name on it. I just don't see that being the case right now. But if you fear that you're going to lose him potentially in free agency, I mean, if you cut him and someone picks him up on waivers, then that's something that you have to consider maybe keeping him. But I think he's a guy that you can sneak onto the practice squad and work with him, and maybe next year he'll be ready to rock and roll for you. But nonetheless, 5'10", 208 pounds. This is a guy that absolutely flew at his pro day, ran a 4.26 at his pro day. So he's got some speed, 29 reps of 2 1/4. So he's got some build to him. And he's a well put together 208 pounder at 5'10". A compact back that checks the speed box, but doesn't check many others convincingly. Does offer special teams value. Had a kickoff return the last 2 seasons. So 2 in the last 2 seasons, 1 in each of the last 2 years at Maryland. So he does offer you some value there, along with the ability to catch it out of the backfield, but lacks adequate pass pro and the power to be an in-between the tackles runner or a true third down wide receiver because of the lack of pass pro. So he's got some gaps and some holes in his game. That's why he's sitting here in the 6th round. But there are some things that you like. Obviously, the speed is something that you cannot dismiss. Anytime you're running a sub 4.3, there's a lot to love there. He can catch it out of the backfield. He's a guy that they did a ton of things with him at Maryland, jet sweeps, lined him up all over the football field. I didn't love how they utilized him, to be honest with you. He didn't get a ton of touches in his senior season at Maryland. He was actually way more productive in his sophomore and junior campaigns. But I think this is a guy that, if used correctly, could offer you some value right away. But again, I think your running back position is healthy and hardy enough to where a guy like Ty Johnson may not crack this roster initially, but don't count him out down the road. But essentially, right now, I don't think he brings anything to the table that you don't already have other than the blazing speed. All right, Theo Riddick isn't a blazer. Neither is Kerryon Johnson. We know that C.J. Anderson isn't, and neither is the Z-Man, Zach Zenner. So if you're looking for an infusion of speed, then that's Ty Johnson's your man. But if you're looking for all-around backs, you have those guys on the roster, and I don't know if Ty Johnson makes that group any better from that standpoint. If you're looking for some special teams prowess in terms of kickoff return ability, Ty Johnson, again, your man for the job. So we'll see what the Lions are looking for out of Ty Johnson. But in the 6th round, 186th pick overall, running back out of Maryland, Ty Johnson for me is So my comp for Ty Johnson is the ex-Denver Broncos running back out of Temple, Ronnie Hillman. And Ronnie Hillman had a solid career in Denver, but it didn't have the sticking power to remain in the league. And so you're hoping Ty Johnson is different than a guy like Ronnie Hillman, but similar traits, similar size, similar speed, similar ability. And we'll see if the outcome is dissimilar from Ronnie Hillman for Ty Johnson. As we go to the 7th round, Lions had two 7th rounders, the first of which 224th selection overall. Tight end out of Georgia, Isaac Nauta is the pick. So Isaac Nauta is a guy that I've heard the Lions bragging on, saying that, hey, we might have the guy with the best hands in all of the draft at the tight end position. And Isaac Nauta, you're thinking, oh, they're talking about TJ Hawkinson. No, they're not talking about super intelligent TJ Hawkinson. They're talking about Isaac Nauta. I beg to differ, okay? You turn on the LSU game, and the first pass he gets thrown, he drops it. So they'll miss me with the best hands at the tight end position, okay? But all seriousness, though, all jokes aside, this is a guy that is solid, not great at any one attribute, but brings something to the table that the Lions need. Depth at the tight end position. You thought they were done after Hawkinson. You thought they were done bringing in Jesse James and already having Michael Roberts on the roster. And they also brought in the ex-quarterback out of Virginia Tech that was with the Buffalo Bills that is converted to tight end. They also brought him in. No, they weren't done. They added another guy to the mix, and I think he's got a legitimate shot of making this roster for the Detroit Lions here in the 7th round. 6'3", 244 pounds, 32-inch arms, ran a 4.8 40 at his pro day. Cleaned up what was an awful time of a 4.92 at the combine. So 4.8, much better than 4.92, that is for certain. By today's standards of a tight end, and Isaac Nauta looks basic, as performed as such at the NFL Scouting Combine, which probably hurt his draft stock. Despite solid tape that shows more athleticism than displayed at the Combine and blocking ability that is solid but could surely improve, he'll probably be underestimated due to his less than ideal size and marginal athleticism. So I thought the Combine just destroyed his stock. He came in with a chance to do what Foster Moreau did out of LSU, which is enhance his stock with a great combine. And Foster Moreau probably went from a 6th or 5th round pick to a legit 3rd, 4th round option with his combine. And Foster Moreau's combine forced me to go back, watch the tape, and I became enamored with Foster Moreau. And I put a 3rd round grade on him, and I think that's where he ultimately went, a 3rd or 4th round to the Oakland Raiders. And I thought Isaac Nauta had the same opportunity to show, because when you watch him in that SEC championship game versus Alabama, there's a pass that he catches on a seam ball where he runs up the middle of the field. First of all, he runs a hell of a route to stutter to the outside, gets a couple of Alabama defenders to bite down on that stutter to the outside, and then takes off up the seam. And he catches it, and you're thinking, okay, these two Bama defenders are going to hawk him down, and this isn't going to go for very long. And they couldn't catch Isaac Nauta. I mean, Isaac was rumbling, stumbling, bumbling up that seam. They couldn't get him, and if not for a corner or safety that was way down the field that ran in front of him and caused him to slow down, they don't catch Isaac Nauta. So I'm thinking to myself, he's got to be faster than 4.92, and he proved that. He looked faster than 4.8 on that play. We're talking about Bama defenders here, guys that can run, and they couldn't catch him. So he looked like he was every bit of 4.75, 4.7 flat running on that play. So I think he's a little bit faster than his combine and pro day times identify him as. But I think that this is a guy that has solid potential. 6'3", 244, not necessarily the ideal size of a tight end in today's NFL. You're looking for a guy that's 6'4", 6'5". But again, we're splitting hairs. 6'3", 6'4", who gives a shit, right? Long as he's getting the job done, I think he can get a little bit better as a blocker, sustain better. I think he makes good contact initially, but doesn't sustain. I'd like to see him stay on his guys and not allow them to get off of the block and make plays. So he can get better as a blocker, but he's a willing participant in the game of blocking. And he's a guy that can catch the football, can separate as a route runner, does the little nuances at the tight end position to create at the top of a route. And so I think he can offer some value as a backup tight end, as a 3rd option. I think he could be a really good 3rd tight end. And so a guy like Michael Roberts isn't safe. He's not safe. Not with Isaac Nauta sniffing around for one of those 3 tight end positions that will be available. Look, 2 have been spoken for already. All right. In Jesse James, who you signed as a free agent, he's on the team. And TJ Hawkinson, super intelligent TJ Hawkinson. You don't spend the 1st round pick on a guy and not expect him to produce right away. So 2 spots are spoken for. There's a 3rd spot at the tight end position. Maybe they'll carry 4. I doubt that seriously. I think there's 3 spots and there's 1 up for grabs. And a guy like Isaac Nauta is going to put his name in the hat for that last spot. And he's got an opportunity to potentially get it. Here in the 7th round, 224th overall selection, tight end out of Georgia, Isaac Nauta for me is So my comp for Isaac Nauta is Lance Kendricks, the ex-Los Angeles or St. Louis Ram that does a little bit of everything, nothing great. Came out of Wisconsin to the Rams, could catch it a little bit. Had more athleticism than we saw at the combine from him, and he's a guy that could block a little bit. Wasn't great at anything, but was really solid and good at everything. And so I think you're getting a guy similar size, similar ability here in Isaac Nauta. We wrap up this draft, 7th round, 229th overall pick. Defensive lineman out of Arizona, P.J. Johnson is the selection. So P.J. Johnson is a big man, and I didn't think going into the draft you needed help. I thought this could have easily been an offensive lineman. Just take a stab at an offensive lineman, throw him in the mix with the guys that you have on the interior of your offensive line, and see if he sticks. But you decided to go in a different route, and I don't know if I blame you necessarily. Snacks Harrison wants a new deal. He's 31 years old. He's not at mandatory minis right now. I really don't know what that means. This is a guy that looks similar to Snacks Harrison in terms of size and his ability. And so, as a matter of fact, that's who I comp him to, Snacks Harrison. Now, I'm not saying he's Snacks Harrison, but he's got that kind of ability. Remember, Snacks Harrison wasn't Snacks Harrison when he got into the league. He had to grow into that persona and into the player that he is now, that is looking for a new deal that you traded for last season. And this guy has a little bit of talent. There are some things that do worry me with P.J. Johnson, and we'll get to him. But this is a guy that is hungry. He's got 2 kids. He's looking to feed those mouths. He needs this. So if that kind of motivation is what drives him, you may get a very motivated football player that comes with his hard hat and lunch pail every day. I didn't necessarily see that on every single snap, and that's something that concerns me. But if you're talking talent, this guy does have a little bit of it here in the 7th round. 6'4", 334. That's a big defensive lineman. It's a big man there. A big, strong defensive lineman that played up and down the Arizona Wildcats defensive line. On one hand, he plays like a brute with the ability to disrupt plays. On the other hand, he's playing high. And he's a taller interior defensive lineman at 6'4", so it's natural for him to stand straight up and give that offensive lineman a lot to put his hands up onto and latch up under. But he can be rendered totally irrelevant when he plays high. All right, guys can take him out of the play and push him wherever they want to push him and get him out of plays. And he can be stuck in neutral at times. And while his athleticism is solid for his frame and Johnson's motor, to me, it sort of runs hot and cold, and that's a turnoff for me. I can't stand guys that don't give maximum effort. With the big guys, they get gassed, and sometimes they turn the switch off. When they're tired, they don't have anything to give. He's one of those guys. But consistency seems to escape him. On one play, he will flash as a one-gap penetrator that gets in the backfield and makes a play for a 3-yard tackle for loss, and you're like, whoa, that was impressive. I watched him get a tackle for a safety in the end zone versus Arizona, and I'm like, that's some impressive shit, man. And then there are plays where you see him, and they lined him up everywhere. They lined him up at defensive end, 3-tech, nose. They lined him up at everywhere, up and down that line and moved him around. And he did some good things, but he's a guy that I'm worried about him at times. So I think he brings some things to the table that can benefit you, but at the same time, he's going to have to be more consistent. And that's the bottom line. If he plays with the level of consistency that his talent suggests, you got a potential replacement for Snacks Harrison, I believe. That's, I think, what you're looking for here. And I think that's why you took a stab in the dark with him, and you may potentially get it. Here in the 7th round, 229th pick overall, defensive lineman out of Arizona, P.J. Johnson for me is... So that's the Lions draft in a nutshell. I thought he did a pretty good job. After initially dropping the ball in the 2nd round, I wasn't in love with the 2nd round pick of Jahlani Tavai. I thought that was way too early for him. Will Harris is cool in the third round, but I wasn't blown away by him either. I got reinvigorated in this draft in the fourth round with the edge rusher Austin Bryant out of Clemson and the cornerback out of Penn State, Amani Oruwariye out of Penn State. Those two got me excited. I think you did some really quality stuff back into the draft too, getting some guys like Isaac Nauta at the tight end position and even P.J. Johnson, who I think could potentially be a steal for you if he plays up to his talent. So there's some stuff here, and I thought that guard was something that you could have looked to address if you felt the need to, but what I couldn't account for is that you ended up getting a guy undrafted out of Wisconsin in Bo Benshaw, who I thought was going to get drafted. Thought he was a fifth-round type of guard. He goes undrafted. That's a guy that could easily make your football team and compete, not necessarily to start, but to get a backup job and maybe enter the lineup at some point in his rookie season. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if Bo Benshaw made this roster and eventually ended up starting in his rookie season. I'm not saying, I'm just saying that's a hell of a undrafted pickup for you there. So although you didn't draft a guy, you still got defensive line help offensive line help potentially in this draft with the signing of Bo Benshaw as an undrafted rookie signee. So let's take a look at the score for the Detroit Lions in this draft. So that's going to do it for me, your man, Louie Tee. Thank you for joining me on the Detroit Lions 2019 NFL Draft Wrap-Up. Remember, if it's not your man T, it's not the best NFL coverage it could be. Also, make sure you subscribe to the Louie Tee Network on YouTube. Like this video, turn on your notifications so you don't miss a thing when it comes to the Detroit Lions and all the other teams in the National Football League as we break them all down here on the Louie Tee Network. And also check out the Louie Tee Network podcast available on Stitcher, Google Music Play, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, and of course the website louieteenetwork.net. I'm your man Louie Tee, signing off. Until next time, have a good one.
Louie